Mm. I shared my screen with Corinne recently, and she's like, look at all those tabs you have open. I was like, story of my life. Never closed tabs.
Okay, so can everyone see the presentation then? I'm terrible with technology, so I just want to make sure.
No, I can't see it. The screen isn't shared.
It's not sharing.
No.
Okay. All right.
There you go. It popped up now.
All right. Well, I'm an old millennial, and the old part definitely rings true when it comes to my technology skills. So thank you everyone for being here today. We're really excited to be a part of the conference. We've actually presented at Push to Publish several times over the years, and just so thankful for the local connection. So my name's Corinne Moulder. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Smith Publicity. And I have my colleague, Kellie Rendina, on the line as well. She's our Manager of Business Development. And just a little bit about Smith Publicity. We are a full service book publicity agency. And that's all that we've ever done at Smith is book promotion. I myself, I've been here for 14 years, hence the old millennial. So I've been here 14 years. We're based in New Jersey. Kellie has joined our team in 2017, coming from a background in publishing as well. And Smith Publicity, as I said, is a full service book publicity agency. So our focus truly is working with authors and publishers to best support the launch of their book. Our vehicle to consumers and our aim in working with authors and publishers is to amplify and build awareness for the forthcoming book, or as we'll refer to often, to the book that may already be released. Because the truth is, for so many different initiatives with publicity and marketing, there are still ample opportunities post-publication to support bringing attention to your books. So we do want to stress, while we'll kind of live in the land today of a lot of pre-launch activities, we do want to keep the time open for questions, because there are so many shifts and changes, as you can imagine, taking place that will afford more opportunity on the back end. A little bit of our history, starting 24 years ago, we really only ever worked with independent authors. I like to stress that. I feel it's a bit of our brand story, because today we do work with in-house marketing teams at well-known publishers and the big five imprints. We love working with traditional small presses. We now work with independent authors. We have fully embraced the hybrid publishing model as well, and find that's a great partnership mentality that our authors come in with at that starting point. But going back to 14 years ago, pitching a self-published book to traditional media really did not go over so well. So we've always had the author-centric mentality, meaning we would lead a lot of times with our author's credentials or our author's brand, if you will, the platform, to highlight the why. Why should this author be given attention by traditional media? Now, 14 years later, as the industry has expanded so much, what's so exciting about our author-centric model is that it still works very well, whether traditionally published, hybrid, or independently published. The author brand, the author platform, as many of you here are well aware and probably sick of hearing about it, is that important. And so the author-centric model today, working with publishers, is still very true. We see so many in-house teams that are hiring out the work of an outsourced publicity team. We have authors who may secure a traditional publishing deal, who will still bring us on to kind of fill in the gaps of their publisher's marketing plan. And again, just kind of raise that visibility to another level. I'm going to go ahead and switch on to our next slide. Okay, so I'm going to have Kellie jump in here to kind of recap the stages of our promotion.
Thanks, Corinne, and I'll let you know when I'm good to flip to the next slide. But yes, thank you so much for joining us. So I thought it was a really interesting concept when coming back to Push to Publish to be able to talk about the stages of book promotion, because I always think of it as broken down into sort of several distinct, sometimes overlapping stages. And so really identifying the stages of your book launch is such an important first piece to any author's promotional plan. So you can, of course, plan accordingly when it comes to budgeting your time, developing appropriate marketing strategy, identifying any budget that you have in mind, keeping those stages in mind. So pre-launch followed by active launch and post-launch. I always compare it to movies when they're coming out. So you never really see major movie promotions far after the movie release date. The sort of accepted wisdom is that any movie worth seeing is going to be promoted prior to the release and during the time that it's in theaters. So it kind of then follows that a book worth reading is going to have buzz around it before and sort of during that active launch phase. You can switch. All right, so that pre-launch phase, I think of it as really falling anywhere from about 6 to 9 months ahead of your publication date. Of course, it can certainly vary, but that is sort of the timeline that we're thinking of when we say pre-launch. You can switch. All right, so during that pre-launch phase, any initiatives that you're really going to be undertaking should really be centered around building a strong platform for the rest of your launch. So really identifying what you want your author brand to be, putting those foundational elements in place, which may include anything from an author website, starting to obtain things like endorsements, honing in on social media strategy, what you want your brand to look like there, the platforms that make the most sense for you on social, starting to identify publicity strategy, book review strategy, and of course, the sort of ever important author platform, as Corinne already sort of alluded to, which is just growing in importance pretty much all of the time.
Good, Cal.
Yep.
Okay, so jumping in, obviously we've talked about the author brand, and is everyone still seeing the presentation up? Because I do have my notes here as well. Okay.
Yep, we see it.
So considering your author brand is really considering how you want to form a relationship with your readers, who's your end buyer. How do you want to sell your books? How do you want to connect with your community? Having an author brand really is essentially building that community where people can come back even after they've read your book. And I think that's really important because so many writers are not just writing one book. It's hard to stop once you get started. So we know that the author brand, it lends authenticity and legitimacy to your book and to your work. It allows you to be easily identified by your readers and audience, and it makes for that cohesive and visually pleasing platform. So readers, media, and reviewers today, they're really not just thinking about a book as that one product, but really trying to consider who is the voice behind that project. So to establish a brand is really yielding you the opportunity to build the trust that so many consumers are looking for. We've seen a rise in storytelling and brand storytelling on the business side of the nonfiction community. And there's really something valuable in that. So we know that consumers in general are finding it takes a lot of touch points with a product before they tip over to purchase. And I think with statistics as high as at least 4,500 books published every single day in the United States, you need to find that quick way to engage your audience and show them again, the why. Why are you qualified, and really why should they consider going ahead and purchasing your book? So the brand doesn't necessarily mean singularly social media or your website, but it's really starting to think of your story and what you want to be relaying to your entire community. So we talk here about kind of the unique selling propositions. And when you're working on the author journey, there's so much creativity that's involved in it. It can be hard to kind of put your professional business hat on, but that really is something that we stress to so many of our authors coming in, is thinking of this as a business endeavor, because you spend so much time writing, and we hear sometimes authors will say they had no idea how much goes into the marketing and publicity prep for their book, and sometimes we'll say it's harder to even get through building the brand and mapping out the publicity plan than it is to write your entire manuscript. So we really do understand that writing is a lot of work. I myself, I don't think I ever have a book in me, but I will say that it does really seem to be about 50% of that push. The other 50%, after spending so much time, we know sometimes decades, pushing a book over to the finish line, that's going to really be spent on developing your brand and building your voice. So in thinking about your unique selling propositions, and we really want to cater here to both fiction and nonfiction, and again, we'll have some time for questions. Your credentials and education is certainly first and foremost a question that we will ask any author who's inquiring about our services. So you're qualified to speak about your area of expertise and your interest based on your personal connections, which can sometimes be that credibility link. It does not just have to be professional, especially for fiction writers and for memoirists. We know that you're not, necessarily coming from decades of experience working in IT, and then you have your IT book as your marketing card. That could be your area of study, your research into a particular event or a movement or a newsworthy story that came out that really moved you and inspired you to write. It could be coming in from your education and your background, your area of study, and showing the areas of interest to which your book relates should always relate back to you and to your work. Again, fiction can be a little bit tricky, but that's where the fun and creativity comes. We'll see authors build personal narratives that they experienced into the thoughts and the commentary and the conflict of their characters. We see sometimes that there is the geographical location that's built into the book, where maybe you grew up in New England and that's your setting and that's your connection to your book that's going to enable you to pull in that authentic storytelling connection. USPs are always going to be your connection to a unique story or a time in your life, maybe that impacted you or changed your way of thinking. Again, it's not just your geographical area that you grew up in. It could be where you're placing your character or the setting of the book. But that then gives you the opportunity to really fine-tune your focus in that media market, to potentially build up social following in that area, and to really just establish that connection to the local community. Research is so critical. And now we are finding, of course, with so much change that's happened in the world over the last 2 years, of course, which is crazy to say, almost 2 years that we've been enjoying our virtual presentations. But we do know that there is a lot of support for own voices and for really speaking from a place of authenticity. So that's where especially media today, reviewers and marketing professionals are drilling down a lot more on research, statistics, and connection, because we are then asked on the side of the media, again, why is this person, why is this author the right fit? Why is this the right voice to amplify? So really making sure you're kind of cross-checking your facts, building in that research and bringing it to market in a way that's going to represent, to the best of your ability, the community to who you're writing to, is very, very critical.
And as you can all imagine, the one of the most important sort of pieces of putting together your author platform is an author website. It's a foundational piece that is, in terms of visibility, so important in just elevating where you are in this space. It adds a layer of legitimacy for your brand, whether you are a fiction or nonfiction author, and really allows different ways for you to interact with potential readers, fans, book reviewers, media as well. I really think of it as an author's sort of home base where visitors can navigate to other important pages, whether that might be an Amazon book listing, a blog that you're upkeeping, social media pages that you have, and all of those other pieces. So I sort of consider it the first foundational piece, that other parts are sort of branches from there. So it's definitely our professional opinion to keep author websites clean and simple, with key tab sections like a section for your author bio, a section where people can go to buy your book, a contact page, any relevant signups, for instance, if you have an author newsletter. And when thinking about design, again, always recommend keeping it simple, consistent, as you see here, applying 2 to 3 primary colors, a consistent font that really aligns with your genre and brand, any relevant logos or images that you might have had designed, professional photos, things like that. And so here are a few examples of our clients' author websites in the past. So some fiction and nonfiction, just for you to get a sense. I go back and take a look. This is a memoir author of ours, as you can see, very on brand with his book cover image and then his professional photos as well. So just to give you sort of a better sense of what some of those might look like across several different genres. Oh, Corinne, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Again, the joys of working from home. If you hear any toddler screaming, that's me, or maybe someone else. But so one thing about the website, because we do get the question a lot, what is the timing to launch the website? Definitely prior to, the launch of your book. And we don't necessarily see a harm in launching months before your book is going to be available. So some people kind of have different funnels or promos that they'll build into the website, and there may be good reason to hold on to the timing of the website. But in general, people aren't going to know your website exists until you start marketing your book and really pushing people towards your website. So we don't necessarily see it as a negative if you are to launch your website in advance of starting your actual publicity plan. So on to endorsements, and this is a really big question that we get a lot of times. And I will start by saying this is definitely an author-led initiative. We have on several occasions come in with our consulting services, more so to guide authors through the process. But it's a very personal endeavor. So even when we are partnering with publishers, it's often put on the author to come up with the list of who they want to contact for endorsements. And most times it's not the publisher who's reaching out to make those asks. So to think of endorsements, I think it's really important to be considering this about 4 to 5 months ahead of your actual release date. And to keep in mind that people generally do like to help. Think about times that you've been asked for help. We almost always like to jump in and pitch in. And that's why, especially starting with people in your very close professional network and your personal network, really cultivating your competing authors within your genre, the list there of those that you admire, those that you aspire to really follow in their footsteps as well. And I think especially for memoirists and for fiction authors, where you may not have that necessarily expansive professional network that you're tapping into, consider those whose research you incorporated into your book, or those who are a part of your personal journey and inspiration for writing. We're currently working with an author, Richard Cohen. He's coming up on his book launch. It's a memoir, and he actually he lost his wife, and his book is dedicated to her end of life journey. And he has several of his own of his wife's medical team that now has supported and endorsed his book, because that was really a strong admiration for the work that they did to support him and his wife's end of life journey. So once you kind of have your list together of the people and individuals that you want to reach out to, the very first thing to think of is how to prepare your pitch. And you want to make it personal. This is a chance to really kind of pull on the heartstrings, if you will. So again, it's not just the personal outreach, but to let them know why you felt that they would appreciate the book and the themes and how you admire their work. And to alert them of the forthcoming book as being a part of an experience that they can join in on. It's really important to reiterate your background. This is your chance to toot your own horn and start getting comfortable with amplifying your own voice. So explain why you're qualified to write the book. This is always going to give individuals a leg up on how they're going to eventually shape their own endorsement. If you have a marketing plan, absolutely let them know. They may be excited at the prospect of free publicity, because if you're going to be investing your own dollar into amplifying your book's awareness, and they're a part of that book, whether it's a front cover endorsement, a back cover endorsement, or even just an endorsement you're able to incorporate into your marketing materials, that can get people excited and also motivate them to have that kind of free publicity, if you will. And another way to kind of scratch their back in an effort to encourage them to lean into the endorsement is let these individuals know that you would like to include any of their books or their company as a part of your endorsement. That's a printed plug for their own work, for their company, for their services, their brand, or their backlist. We have, again, started rolling out some more support in prepping authors for the endorsement ask, and have found that putting everything together in one simple file has been such an easy way to then make that ask and give everyone what they need to consider making that endorsement. So we use oftentimes Dropbox, where we will then include the website, all social media platforms. We will absolutely encourage a personalized pitch letter to each unique individual who you're making that ask to. And of course, state your connections there. It is preferred to have the full manuscript, although again, in our world, it depends. We say it every single day, probably every hour. So, if you're not going to have access to the full manuscript or the full digital manuscript, at least you want to have some really impactful sample chapters. You want to have your intro, table of contents, the preface, the foreword, anything that you could really have to share the writing voice and the storyline that the book is going to be taking is important. Include your photos and any impactful statistics that would also support that ask and to give individuals a deeper dive into your book. One thing is to make it very easy for them, and this is not an unusual ask at all, is to ask those who you're really strongly seeking endorsements for, sometimes from individuals who carry a very, very busy schedule, make the suggestion that you could write the endorsement for them with their sign off on using it, that you're happy to prepare that testimonial and have them kind of take a look at it and approve it. Because that is an ask, that's time on someone else's plate. So for anyone who you feel strongly about making it easier for them to say yes, that is a very common ask. I think it's really important as well, if you strike gold and you start getting feedback from endorsements and those that you're reaching out to, you're collecting them. It's so important that you don't stop. You really can't have enough endorsements. You can't have enough testimonials. You'll add them to your website. You'll add them to your marketing materials. So for the list that you compile and the work that you put into to starting this request, there is really no time that you need to necessarily stop, because unique endorsements from various supportive individuals, they can be applied to the various tactics that you're rolling out in your marketing plan, where maybe it is one professional from the industry that you work in that's going to tip over buyers in that specific industry. Whereas then someone coming in from the research side is going to relate more to the expansive parenting community, for instance. So you can pick and choose then which endorsements you're using as a point to leverage the impact of the end ask once you're there in the land of actual book promotion.
Most definitely. And I think too, Corinne, you mentioned this the other day. I thought it was interesting. Everyone I'm sure here has heard of just the industry-wide delays, printing delays, shipping delays. And we've been seeing some things that we haven't seen in a while. We've been seeing blads as opposed to full arcs. So I think just for sort of this time being where the industry is, I think people have been a bit more lenient about whether or not they would be accepting a full arc or a full sort of pretty much finished manuscript versus something that's a little bit less so. So I thought that was something that's sort of timely and just goes along with what we're seeing in the industry right now, at least right now. And yes, Corinne, feel free to go to the next one. So of course, given where we are right now in the industry, it's pretty impossible to avoid having a social media presence as an author, no matter what genre that you're specializing in. It's really become such an integral part of growing your author brand, finding and connecting with readers and other writers as well, other authors. While you may have personal social media pages already, I always encourage authors to really think about your target readers, where they spend most time on social media based on their demographic, their age range, whether it be Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, whatever it is, and really think about how you want to present yourself. Does it make sense to repurpose your existing social media pages or create complete new ones for your author brand specifically? We always suggest really choosing at least one or two to focus on, as opposed to spreading yourself too thin across all social media channels. I think that's unfortunately a good way to set yourself up for failure when you're choosing to spread yourself amongst all social media platforms. If you're a YA author and you choose Twitter, that just might not be a good fit. And of course, trying to really choose platforms that you personally enjoy and you like to use as well. I think this would really make any author more apt to actually continue using those platforms on a consistent basis and continually engaging with other readers. We really suggest also, in terms of content, diversifying your content and presence by offering things like incentives and giveaways, engaging with readers and other authors and their books, sharing some background about yourself if you do choose to get kind of personal and on that level with your social media presence. And if you don't, that's okay too. There are other ways to go about really getting diverse content out there. Another important tip that we really like to share is thinking about it from that sort of 80-20 rule. Nobody likes to be bombarded with a sales pitch constantly. So trying to make anywhere from about 20%, of course, roughly, of your content centered around your upcoming book. what's coming out in your pipeline, and then 80% of your content really adding value in different ways to get people into your network and your web, whether it be through reviewing other authors' books, a post that invites your followers to engage, whether it's like, what are you reading this fall? What books do you consistently return to again and again? If you're a nonfiction author that's a professional, a tip or professional insights that you have to share, things like that. And of course, being consistent in terms of your brand and engaging consistently always is such an important piece to social media strategy as well. And again, this is during that sort of pre-launch phase.
If I can just add to that too, because this has been just such a revelation in the past year and a half. Everyone is working to build a brand right now. Reviewers themselves are building their own brands. Journalists are building their own brands. The landscape is just changing rapidly. I know that there's even a new platform that journalists are migrating to put out their own content because there's been so many layoffs now at a lot of different publications. So when it comes to the social media presence, and Kellie hit this earlier, you can't spread yourself too thin, and you do want to make sure you're aligning yourself with the platform that's going to relate most to your end user. That's where you're going to find the reviewers who are also catering to the end user, and to the media contacts who are reporting to your target audience. So to think of yourself as building your own brand on your social media platform, those that you're looking to contact to be a vehicle of sharing your message, they're doing the very same thing. So then when you're coming time to start actually promoting your book, you're going to have the attraction of the following, but also that opportunity to start following those that you want to eventually report on your book. So it's really important to kind of create another list of ideas of individuals that you want to ultimately report and review your book, and start following them and engaging with them just as much as you're working to build up your own content. I mean, truly, you need to be doing something like every single day, and it can feel overwhelming where to start with it. But something we love to do as a tip-off at the start of a campaign. And for us, we can start working with an author in terms of the pre-launch anywhere from 1 month prior to 6 months prior is typically when we're starting to engage media and reviewers, because that's typically the timeline that we'll have access to a media-ready shareable file. Something that we love to do, even if it's 1 month before, even if it's 1 month post, we will share a short list of media contacts and their social media handles, and have that be a week 1 initiative. Go follow these individuals, start liking their posts, and start creating those touch points. It also, just on a side note, start to find who they're following as well, because that's a great indicator of who you also may start to expand into other audiences with, and just to have that support and to bring that cohesion together. It's not just for your reader, it's also for those that you're hoping will report and review your book as well, that social media has become that much more impactful. And here's just a couple examples. So Amanda McKinney, I think, was she debut, Kellie?
She's an indie author. She's self-published, and her social media presence is so impressive. Mm-hmm. She's built such a platform for herself. She ended up being featured on the Today Show, which is just amazing. And as you can imagine, a tough get for a fiction author, let alone a self-published fiction author. And I attribute a lot of that to her existing brand that she's really developed. So she's done such a great job.
Yeah, and she particularly has made such a big push on Instagram. And if one group that I'm not sure if we're touching on it today, but it's the Bookstagram community. So Bookstagrammers are essentially book reviewers who use Instagram now as their platform for sharing. So they're called bookstagrammers. They're not actually new. I think we started to see the bookstagram trend in maybe 2016. And it's just become such a regular part of our lifestyle, our memoir, our fiction, and our children's book promotion. Because that's where consumers are going to also now find recommendations for reads. So we now are treating our bookstagrammer contacts, which essentially are reviewers, we treat them as we would a traditional media contact. We're still pitching them in advance of the book launch. We're providing them with press materials, with copies of the book for consideration. What the end result is with the Bookstagram post is typically a very visually, aesthetically pleasing image with the book cover, followed by the comment or the caption rather, that would be a bit of the book review. Again, everyone's building their brand. So likely the Bookstagrammer does have a book review blog that they're trying to get people to come back to as well, where you may see the full review. But what's so exciting is there's such loyalty to the Bookstagram community that once you are posting and working with Bookstagrammers, you will see the comments start filling up when they put a new book up. And that's right there. You're seeing readers who are actually engaging immediately with your book. So that's just one instance of a platform that's really working right now for lifestyle, for fiction, children's books, and memoirs. There also is, and I can't speak to this very well because I'm an old lady, but it's the TikTok community and the book talkers, which we're just starting now to again treat more as our media as a traditional media contact. But I guess TikTok is not going anywhere. And in fact, we're seeing a nice migration of book reviewers who are now using their TikTok platform to share their book reviews. So that's another area that's kind of a fast growing trend. And we can certainly address any questions on that to the best of our ability when we get, to our Q&A. I will just say too, for subsets, we tend to see LinkedIn, of course, for a lot of our business authors, although we tend to see from the mental wellness, trauma and recovery medical community, a lot of times people do not have time to build up a platform. And building a brand is just not something they have time for when they're actively engaging with the medical community. So we see a lot of times people will kind of override the steps that we're talking about here and just use their LinkedIn platform. That really does tend to work well in the psychology, health and wellness, and medical space. And then of course for business as well. All right, that was a nice little tangent there. So we are now kind of moving into the space of actually building out your publicity plan. Give yourself a lot of congratulations, because through the knowledge that you've now obtained through building out your social media platform and kind of figuring out the timing of the strategy of when you're going to have books in hand to start your endorsement asks, you've already been building out lists. You've been getting an idea of where your target audience lives, where they are consuming their news, and what's really connecting with them on a cultural or social level. What is interesting about the right time for launching your publicity or marketing plan and putting things in motion, now that you've kind of established your platform, things are really shifting again, as we've seen. And just to Kellie's point, this year, there is a very well-known paper shortage happening in the publishing world. And so we're even seeing publications that unfortunately were bumped from 2020 to 2021 in hopes that it would be the better year to launch. There's still a lot of uncertainty when it comes to it. A publication like Publishers Weekly was always very hard and fast. Submit 4 to 5 months ahead for review consideration. And now we're seeing with the pre-order and the shifting of materials and the supply chain, we are seeing a little bit more leniency. Again, Publishers Weekly, because I think many of us here will know Publishers Weekly. They also were really only accepting print copies before. And over the last year, we've seen an acceptance of digital. We are starting to see some outlets shift back to wanting some print copies, but we'll see how that shakes out here in the fourth quarter with the paper shortage and the holiday season coming up. But I will say, again, with the publicity plan, whether you are ready to go 6 months prior because you have your advanced review copies or your early reader copies, or you're ready to just kind of turn on a blitz 1 month before, there is really no wrong or right time to launch. If you do have a major goal for book sales, that is an indicator, however, that you will be putting your actual publicity plan in motion, likely a minimum of 4 to 6 months prior. And that's just because the lead times of media and the lead times for what we call our book-centric focus, you actually want to give the reviewers and give media contacts the time to sit with your book. So when we talk about book-centric focus versus author-centric focus, book-centric implies the traditional book review, an excerpt, a book roundup where it may be the top 10 fiction books for the holiday season, or, the 5 top anti-bullying books for Bullying Prevention Month, which is in October. And so to kind of think about when your publication date is slated for, if book coverage and book sales are a major push for you, you want to start to kind of backtrack anywhere from 4 to 6 months prior as your indicator of where you want to get started. For a lot of our authors who are really looking at the brand building possibilities, for the business initiatives and opportunities that may come through the launch of their book, it's not as critical to start that far out, nor is it for the fiction author who really wants to make a big splash with digital and the digital and online review community. There we're talking, about a month prior, 2 months prior, with opportunity to run your plan post-publication. So I say that, and I already said it depends. It depends when you're going to launch your publicity plan based off of your goals, off of your budget, and off of your expectations for your partnership with who you may be connecting to. I did mention budget in there. I think it's incredibly important that you have your max budget in mind when you're considering engaging with a publicist or a marketing professional. There is definitely something to be said about the shiny object syndrome. So you're going to start to hear things about what you could be doing, or advertisements you might want to have, or book submissions that you might want to move forward with. And I will say this, and it's something we say pretty regularly here at Smith: we don't encourage you put your budget into one basket, because it does take a village to launch a book. Whether you're doing a lot of the self-promotional activity and kind of navigating where you're going to advertise or who you're going to market with, you want to have reserve, because you just never know what's going to come up that you didn't know about. I know that there are a lot of independent publishers, hybrid publishers, and also traditional that do have author communities where people are constantly sharing the new book awards that are coming out, or new exciting features and services that are launching that might be of interest to you. Ebook promos. I think many of us have probably heard of BookBub, which is a large online campaign that you can run for a promo and a giveaway. There are a lot of, stipulations that go along with being considered for a BookBub campaign. But what people don't know is that there are outlets like the Feisty Librarian. For $150 instead of $3,500, you may be able to run an ebook promo. So give yourself time and give yourself grace to plan out the publicity plan. And please just remember to keep a budget on reserve, because there's no doubt you will find something else that you want to do once you run your plan, or you may want to keep going with something if you're finding it to be an effective strategy. And we feel for authors who have gone through their budget without really having an idea of the best way to spend it. So be careful with that. And to the budget question, ask yourself how you want to monetize your publicity and marketing initiatives. So I will say sometimes the unpleasant situation that we may find ourselves in at Smith is when an author wants to pay us to bring them on. And we like the concept of the book. We feel the author has a connection, but we don't see that brand platform. We don't see that opportunity to really have them build back in the reviews, the coverage, the interviews that we may secure into what their marketing machine is. So to think about how you want to monetize your publicity, that could be through courses, through training courses that you have, through different consultations that you offer, through speaking engagements. It could be through different book clubs that you're kind of hosting, or where you're making a push there. And I just think it's important to not just want to do publicity for the sake of having your 15 minutes of fame, but that you see it as a part of a bigger wheel that's going to build back that opportunity for the awareness that you're generating in that very brief interview or that short review that may come out for your book. And publicity versus marketing, we could have a whole discussion on this here, but I do like to consider publicity as the credibility. You cannot force a reviewer to review your book, and I'm talking reviewer here as in the submission for an editorial review, such as pitching to the New York Times, pitching to Publishers Weekly, or to Library Journal. So you are really looking at the credibility that it brings back when media is selecting your book to be reviewed or to be covered, versus marketing, where you do have a lot more control. That's the umbrella under which advertising falls, where you're going to find those promos, the book award submissions. You have more of an idea of how your budget is going to produce a return on investment with marketing than you do with publicity. Of course, we're biased to publicity because we are publicists, but we have seen in the past 5 years in particular, such a major push on bringing the two together, which again, is why you don't want to put all of your eggs into one basket. All right, so you're coming up now on your launch of your book.
Awesome. So at this stage, you're coming towards the launch of your book and eventually going to be entering into the post-launch phase. So during this time, I like to think of it as all of the work that you've done now starting to culminate into these visible things. So Corinne touched on book reviews, of course, earlier in the presentation. And oftentimes, mostly when you're looking at the high rates of success of getting book reviews, you're doing that work a few months in advance, with those book reviews ideally coming out just as the book is now available for people to purchase. So that's where that takes us into the sort of active launch phase. Can't stress enough the importance of book reviews. They really serve to lend legitimacy to your work and brand, to allow readers to find your book and create visibility and buzz. Authors really have lots of choices. We already started to get into the sort of influencer community, but there are lots of choices when it comes to obtaining book reviews. And some authors choose to hire outside publicists, such as Smith, to build momentum in the reviewer space. Others choose to start doing that work independently and execute that type of outreach themselves. And reviews can come from a variety of places. So whether that be a literary website or an online extensions of a print publication, traditional trade reviews and editorial reviews, as Corinne touched on, reviews in magazines and newspapers, the blogging space, and influencers like bookstagrammers and book talkers, consumer reviews on sites like Amazon, Goodreads, those types as well. I do like to stress again, I know we've already sort of touched on it, but the importance of the Bookstagram and the book talk community, especially in the fiction space. There are some other spaces where I think it's really relevant to women's interest. I think fiction and nonfiction, lifestyle, memoir, but the influencer community, especially the TikTok community lately, it's incredibly powerful. I've been seeing how lately the book talk community has really brought visibility back to books that are a few years old that were once bestsellers and have put them back on the map, on the bestseller list again. So I can't stress enough how important those communities are if it's a target audience where your reader lives. So important to familiarize yourself there. And there really are an endless amount of ways to find reviewers these days. I mean, for genre influencers like Bookstagram and Book Talk, searching and following certain relevant hashtags on social media is a really an easy and effective way to find reviewers in your space. I mean, those common hashtags, I'm sure you've seen them, include the Bookstagram, Bookstagrammer, as well as those that are relevant to your genre, like hashtag middle grade reviewer, hashtag chicklet, whatever it is. And on Goodreads, being able to join relevant discussion threads and genre relevant forums is a great way to start connecting with potential readers and reviewers, more so on the consumer side as well. Conducting online research into influential bloggers in your space, whether it be a lifestyle blogger that connects to themes in your book, or someone who specifically really reviews certain genres of books, and growing your relationship with them organically is another really nice way to plant the seed for book review coverage on blogs. I know we're starting to run a little bit tight on time, and I want to be able to answer questions. So I think we can go on to the next one.
Okay. I just wanted to dive a little bit into byline articles and what we're now seeing is called guest essays, although I don't see that updated on our presentation here. And the guest essay is the former opinion piece, now dubbed guest essay by New York Times. But byline articles and expert commentary, not even expert commentary, but author commentary, can also be effective ways to secure coverage within the spaces where your target audience is consuming their news or consuming their book recommendations. The articles that are written are typically anywhere from 800 to 1,000 words. And surprisingly, should not reference your book, should not include your book title, should not, reflect anything as seen in my book. That plug comes in your bio. But we are, again, with so many layoffs happening in the media landscape, many people shifting to digital, finding that the easier we can make it for media to cover our authors, which sometimes does come through the format of a guest contributor opportunity where they're essentially writing it for media to cover it as is, can be an effective strategy as well. And so here, just wanted to talk a little bit about appearances and promos. Appearances, of course, are kind of subject to geographical location and COVID restrictions right now. Virtual is really pretty much the norm these days. And for anyone here that's working on and up to the launch of their book, even more of a critical point to build your social media following, because if you have people who are engaged on your social, that's really going to be giving you that opportunity for maximizing an appearance or a digital or a virtual event. The media interviews being accessible through virtual has been very beneficial to us. We've had a lot of support from really highly watched regional TV programs where once we had to have the author in studio, we're now able to conduct virtually via Skype or Zoom or Google Meet. And we're able to kind of plan out what we're calling our regional TV tours, which is not something that would be cost effective if you had to travel to several small markets for that TV exposure. And then book talks are certainly still happening. We always recommend connecting with your local independent bookstore first, as that's just such a way to celebrate the community as at large, and also to really align yourself with your local community. And then we did briefly touch earlier on the ebook giveaways, and not to just pigeonhole a promo as BookBub, but to consider other alternatives like a fussy librarian and other programs and services that we'd be happy to certainly share some more information on at a later date. So with the 5 minutes we have here, I think we should open it up for questions if anybody wants to kind of dive in.
Hi, I have a question.
Hi, Christine.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. It was wonderful. I have a book, If All Things Work Out, that will come out in June. And
Mhm.
I already have a website and I've worked on social media quite a bit. And my website, though, like in terms of building a brand, it's through GoDaddy, and they have like a form. You know, like I noticed the websites that your clients had set up that you put on the slides. Is that something that they did like themselves or that you helped them with?
We don't actually build out or design the website. We do see a lot of our authors use WordPress, but we have had authors use GoDaddy and other template sites as well. I think it's just a matter of making sure you're being selective and impactful with the navigation tabs that you have. I think to think of your website homepage, that's free. That's your advertising spot. So for now, you may not have your book cover prepared, but you're going to want to have what's bringing people there in the first place. So when is your book coming out? Any quotes that you have, any excerpts, or even dialogue that you want to share from a character in the book there. We do find that having a media or review page is another important tab, because that's going to allow you to start adding in what other people are saying as you see that come through. And also having information, Christine, about yourself always to connect that why you're qualified to write the book or why people should crack it open is important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question.
Hi.
I wanted to find out what you think is the best platform to advertise for YA books. Is it Facebook, Amazon, Google? I'm always getting bombarded with all of these ads, and I don't know where it's best to put my money in.
Yeah, I tend to think that when it comes to paid advertising, I think Instagram and I think Amazon are the best two for the YA space. They're really easier to control in terms of budget. And this is an area I feel like I know enough to be a little dangerous in, but I really think that social media, Instagram is a great place for that particular demographic. And then I think Amazon as well. You have a lot of control over budget. You can do as low as $5 per day and scale up from there and do some beta testing that way. But I tend to think, given your demographic, that those are likely the two places where you'd want to probably put some budget into.
Thank you. Just to follow up on Amazon, I'm not really sure how to go about that, how to start. So I thought it was like per clicks, or, you're saying $5 a day.
More for, I think, the paid boost on Instagram may be closer there. The Amazon advertising it's a world of its own. We've heard incredible success stories, and we've heard people who said, I put so much money into it and I didn't see any return. Advertising is territory that we like to know a little bit about, but don't get too heavily into the trenches with, because again, that's kind of under the bigger marketing umbrella. However, we are in a networking group, and I think we found the name of someone, I believe, Cal, who tends to do some advertising on Amazon. That's even another area that we haven't really aligned ourselves yet with a professional who's a go-to yet for Amazon advertising, because there is a lot of intricacies to it. So I can't necessarily speak too greatly on the Amazon advertising.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was hoping to find out more about that, because I don't want to be one of those unsuccessful stories.
You don't. No, you don't. You certainly don't.
it's tough. I do know of a contact who does offer those services. I think like a lot of professionals right now in this space, I do get the sense that she's pretty booked up, but she knows a lot about it. Her website, if you're interested in taking a look, is Molly Hale Media. And she's very well versed in Amazon ad buys, and it's Molly, Hale, Molly Hale Media.
Hale. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
No problem.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
What is your opinion about doing being a guest on podcasts as a way of doing promotion? And what's the return on that in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, to think of the podcast listening community, we kind of think of them as information seekers. And so we absolutely love the podcast interview because it offers a longer format for authors. So whether fiction or nonfiction or lifestyle, you actually have more than 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, which is the typical radio interview timeline, to dive into podcasts and actually get into the meat of your book or the meat of the story brand that we kind of talked about at the beginning. So absolutely, the podcast community is huge. And what was the one? Is it Podmatch? I think I just learned about, which is a free site, Andrea, and anyone on here. We have had some authors, you set up your own profile, and it's almost like a dating service for podcast producers. One author we're working with, she's launching with She Writes Press in the spring, and she's already secured 2 of her own interviews. We don't even have her ARCs yet, and she's booking her own podcast through Podmatch. And also from a post-publication perspective, just like how Kellie had mentioned, the swarm of reviewers and influencers who are picking up past publications now and bringing new life to it. The podcast community, Andrea, can be a really nice way post-publication to continue keeping up with opportunity to discuss your book.
And just one quick follow-up. So are you finding, do you have any anecdotal evidence of positive outcomes of that besides the publicity, but like in terms of book sales or?
Yeah, so it's podcasts are, so let me backtrack one step here. We never really can tell that clear direct line from a TV interview, a podcast interview to direct book sales, because a lot of times it is requiring several touch points. They see your ad on shelf awareness, and then they see, they hear about you on the podcast. But because of the longer format with podcast and the opportunity to organically plug your book and talk more in a natural way about your inspiration for it or the backstory, we find it builds that trust and the connection with the listening audience. And we do see more of a return on book sales with podcasts is the feedback that we get.
I think I want to mention too that there's more permanence to being on a podcast episode as opposed to being on a regional interview with a local news station or being on a radio interview, because I know I personally go back to podcasts that are months or years old once I find a podcast that I like. So I tend to think that there's a bit more longevity and permanence to podcast interviews as well.
Okay, and I think we have run over our session here. I'm just dropping Kellie and my email because I don't even think we got to our contact slide in the chat, and would certainly welcome any questions, follow-ups beyond today. I feel like we always try to leave time for questions, and we would love to answer any that people have. Yes.
Well, technically, the next session doesn't start until 2:30.
Okay.
I'm good to stay on then. If people have questions, we'd love to hear them.
You can also email me the slides and I'll send it to everyone.
That'd be great, Lena. We will. Yeah, but just parting words, it's never too late to really put effort into sharing your book. Definitely think of all your personal connections and build out from there. Consider where your reader avatar, when you're writing your book, consider who that reader avatar is. and find out where they are consuming their news, where they're getting their book recommendations, what associations and organizations they tend to follow, because you're just going to start kind of getting into the minds of your reader that way.
Super. Well, thank you so much, Kellie and Corinne, for all of your advice.
Alex.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right.
Thanks for having us.
Bye now. Thank you.
Bye.
Hello. The people who, yeah, so we have a couple minutes until the next panel starts.
Hi,
Hello,
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. I didn't mean to zoom in or bomb the other panel. I thought we were going to be let in when it was ready, so I
No,
feel.
they ran
Where I'm
over.
at.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I kind of just showed up and I was like, oh, wait, there's another panel still happening. Oops.
I know. I'm like, well, at least it was just my picture and not me, so. Yeah, I never like to leave things for the last minute because technology, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's kind of uncertain. I mean, I like to think I had reliable Wi-Fi, and then I remember that this past Tuesday, I mean, my internet went out for no reason. So,
You know, I've been dealing with actually at the post-production stage with a book right now in publishing, and everything seems to be going wrong on everybody's end technologically. I've never seen anything like it. I'm just wondering if, people are losing their internet service, their cell phone service, their the WeTransfer that we use with, the files, things like that. The wrong ones are coming up, and it's like corrections are made and not saved. I've never seen anything like this happen. I'm wondering if
there's something cosmic happening with it or something. It has to be.
Well, maybe that's what happened with Facebook. I don't know.
Yeah, Facebook and Instagram and everything just went kaput.
Right. Just shows how much we depend on technology for everything.
Yeah, I had to go to my friend's place to borrow their Wi-Fi for a couple hours because I had work to do. And yeah, so.
Okay, does anybody have any idea how many people might be attending this?
It varies. There are 3 other sessions going on right now. This is like the only session that has 4 sessions running.
Oh, okay.
Yes, but it's going to be recorded. So anyone who can't make it today